Hi, Swan here from Catagania. Welcome to my YouTube channel. The page that I just put aside is a printout that I purchased from Amber K Creative from her Etsy store, and I will be using as the focal point. It really reminds me of my granddaughter, so I thought what a perfect opportunity to use this particular page that I've had on hand for a little while. So I'm just cutting up some lace and tearing up some papers to add to the background, and I will add them down with some gel medium. Now that I've got those stuck down, I'm going to use this die cut piece and use that as a stencil and add some gel and also some coarse textured gel to add some more texture to the page. Because I'm using gel, I'm actually going to be letting it dry overnight so that the gel actually dries properly. I do use the hairdryer, the heat gun a little bit to dry, but it's only to get it started while I set it aside. As the lace is not cotton, it actually melts, and while it can add a different texture, it's not what I'm after today. So I will let this dry overnight. Now on the next day I'll actually add some gesso, and I'll add this very thickly through the lace as just to get some depth in there, so it'll actually grab the sprays that I'm going to be using. Now this will probably cover a lot of the background, and while that can be often sad, it's part of doing these sort of journals. I don't lose a lot, I've just gained a lot of depth more than actual colour from the background. So I'll just keep adding gesso, and I will let some of it dry overnight to make sure it's dry for the sprays that I'm going to be using. But I'll just keep adding until I've got exactly the background I'm after. Now the page is ready for the sprays. So I'll set up for spray time. So first I'll add the pink, and I'm actually not spraying the actual inks, I'm actually adding them slowly. Now, one warning on this, be careful when you've got that set aside, because it's so easy to actually bump it and send it all over your desk. It's not the first time I've done it, and in fact when I first got one of the collections, one of the greens, just got it all shaken up and all made, and I hadn't had put the lid on properly after adding the water, and it went all over my desk. It's one of the green pages you've seen me using one of my layouts. So I'll just keep adding colour where I feel, as these are the colours that are actually in the background or part of the depth of the actual pages that I got to use as the feature point, and from Amber. Now that I've got the page to this step, I'm actually going to have a look at the actual feature points and cut them out and see if the background's going to work with the images that I have. So I'm just sorry, I've cut them off screen, but it just seemed to be a little bit easier. So I've cut most of these out. I'm just going to dry, and I've actually decided it's too deep from what I see on the features, so I'm just going to dab some of the damp, and it actually was amazing how much ink was still actually behind the lace, but it did leave a nice little more a quiet background rather than as bright as deep as it was, which seems to work better with the feature. So I'm just deciding which other parts of it I'm going to be using. As the page is dry now, I can actually sit it on and see. I'm deciding whether to add the larger face feature. While it looks good at this particular point, kind of strangely, I will work around and see what else I can do. And I've decided to cut out the hearts and see where they sit and how I'm going to place all this. It's not something that that seem to decide straight away. The page, it's almost like the page actually talks to you about where they want to be. So you just kind of go with it and keep adding and taking away until you're happy with the page layout. So this is the process I'm doing at the moment. I decided just to clean the bench up a little bit, as now, because the printout was actually printed with an inkjet printer, something to bear in mind that if it does get wet, it will bleed. It acts like a watercolour. So what I'm just doing to the surface is actually adding some gel medium, and I'm using the gloss as I liked the effect it actually does on the page. So I'll set these aside and dry, and you need to do this quickly. So if you just put a little bit at the top and use a driver's license, you can sweep down the page without activating the actual ink in the process, and it will seal at the front of the page in case of getting spills. And yes, you've got to be careful of the back too, and I've actually, off camera, I actually gelled the back as well. So this is what I'm doing with all the, once they dry I'll do the backs, and this is what I'll do with all those pieces that will be on the final layout. So I've put these aside, and then I realised I really need another colour, and it seemed to be a brown. So I've got some acrylic ink and added some water to it, and I'm going to add drops to the page and see if that's enough, and keep working on the background, as it wasn't quite working from my liking for the actual highlighted parts. Now I'm a lot happier with the background, so now I'm just going to add the feature points and lay them on the page to see if I'm happy with their placement. So as you see, it is a jumbling game, so I finally work out a place for them, and this seems to be my happy place with what I've decided. Must have been still a bit tacky because it seemed to stick with the hearts, which is fine, works out well. So on that I decided to just stick them to the page and go from there. So I'm just gelling each of these pieces using again the gel medium, which will actually, because there's the lace and the other stenciling, will actually push through and actually hold these pieces onto the actual background. So I've now decided to add an iridescent medium to the features, just to add a little bit of more shine to them. So I'll add that to all of them as thinly as possible, which will just, you can see it as it's wet, the little bit of iridescent look to it, and it's just something that sometimes I really like, things to shine on a page rather than being flat, which is one of the reasons behind it. And then I'm just adding some black ink around the edging, just to add some more depth to the page. Just seems to frame it a little bit. So I'll dry all this off, including the inks, as it's not an archival, it's a more a water paint, kind of water ink acrylic, so I'll just give it all a bit of a dry. So I then look at the ideology labels, and I find some of the small talk that mention the word heart, basically, is what I was actually looking for. So I add these to the page randomly, or not so randomly, whatever the words they seem to want to sit. So this is where they ended up going. So I've just temporarily held them down so I can have a look and decide where I want them. So this is roughly where I like, and I think this is what I'll end up keeping. I think that looks quite good there. So I've stuck those down with some gloss accent, and I've decided to actually go a little bit further with the archival ink and actually add some black coming through on the lace, just to darken it up and actually show the lace up a little bit more. So I'm also getting the blending tool and blending some of the black in through, which just highlights some of those textures that are in the background. Now out comes the Posca pen. Can't finish a page without the Posca pens I've found. So I'm just again reframing the outside, just giving it a little bit thicker line around, and it's just a case of holding the finger and using it as a guide to go, so it seems to be more equal around the actual journal layout. So I'll add some lines and some dots and some scribbles on this page, and hopefully then it'll be what I would say would be finished. I'm just framing again these hearts just so they pop out a little bit. I was using the thinner black pen. I seem to have more luck with the blacks than I do the whites. For some reason the whites can get very, very fussy on these pens, but I really do like the effect they give, and it is a permanent once it is dry. So I'm trying to add some of the white Posca, and it ended up being that it brought too much ink down, so I put some dots all over the page. Shit, you know, it's one of those things that happen that work. So, and now that the actual paint's down, I'm able to do the white framing that I was actually after in the previously. So, and it seemed to work better. I just wanted to kind of let them blend back into the page a little bit, but be highlighted at the same time. And now I'll just add some dots here and there to the page, especially to the flowers, and some scribbles in the circles, which I'll also add to the page. They won't be as visible, but they will be there. So adding these little features just makes those features more mine. While they are still embarques, this page spread is something that I've created for my pleasure and for your viewing. So I'm just adding some more dots with the thicker white and looking at the page and deciding if that's all that's needed, but of course some more dots. And I just sign, and I sign cover and the date I finish the page. Now if you're wondering where cover came from, it's actually from my grandchildren, and a lot of them call me Cuppa instead of Grandma, which I love deeply. And really the little one of my grandchildren that actually started it is my granddaughter, who I find this particular image reminds me of. So, on my heart to my Izzy. So this page is actually named Izzy's Heart, as it's really big. So bye from myself, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and please give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Thank you, and take care, and be safe, be happy, believe in yourself.